What's up? My name is Leon. This is Leon Nation. Back at it again with another great video. Tonight I will be reading chapter 1 of Candace Owens' Blackout: How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantation. Thank you all for joining me. Haha. Yeah, man, I've been getting some of that red pill knowledge. So this is the front cover right here. It says it's time for a black exit. Political activist and social media star Candace Owens addresses the many ways that Democrat Party policies hurt rather than help the African American community and why she and many others are turning right. Black Americans have long been shackled to the Democrats, seeing no viable alternative. They have watched liberal politicians take the black vote for granted without pledging anything in return. In Blackout, Owens argues that this automatic allegiance is both illogical and unearned. She contends that the Democrat Party has a long history of racism and exposes the ideals that hinder the black community's ability to rise above poverty, live independent and successful lives, and be an active part of the American dream. Instead, Owens offers up a different ideology by issuing a challenge to her readers. It's time for a major black exodus from dependency, from victimhood, from miseducation, and the Democrat Party, which perpetuates all three. Owens explains that government assistance is a double edged sword that the left dismisses, the faith so important to the black community, that Democrat permissiveness towards abortion disproportionately affects black babies, that the hashtag Me Too movement hurts black men, and much more, weaving in her personal story, which ushered her from a roach infested low income apartment to, and I don't know where that continues. But sounds pretty good. Sounds good so far to me. So I'm gonna start with it says to grandma and granddad, may my every action make you proud. Forward by Larry Elder. Introduction. What do you have to lose? And that's the chapter I'll be reading tonight. I'm gonna skip the forward for now. Maybe I'll go back and do that later. But the first chapter starts. What do you have to lose? So, what does it mean today to be a Black American? Does it mean anything more than simply my skin color? Being Black and my having been born in a landmass bordering the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Indeed, why does being a Black Canadian, a Black Russian, or even a Black person from Southern Africa not carry quite the same weight as being a Black American? Why has my identity group been debated with more significance than any other countries in the world? If you are a if you are a Black person in America today, your identity is as much defined by your skin color as it was more than 100 years ago, and quite similarly for all the wrong reasons. To be a Black American means to have your life narrative predetermined, a routine of failure followed by alleged blamelessness due to perceived impotence. It means constant subjection to the bigotry of lower expectations, a culture of pacifying our shortcomings through predeposition. Above all else, being Black in America today means to sit at the epicenter of the struggle for the soul of our nation, a vital struggle that will come to define the future of not only our country, but our country. A struggle between victimhood and victorhood, in which adoption will bring forth prosperity. Will we decide upon victimhood? Will we choose to absolve ourselves of personal responsibility and simply accept welfare and handouts from the state? Or will we awaken ourselves to our potential through the recognition of our own culpability? It is undeniable that for Black America, the Democrats have been the upper hand for several decades. They have exemplarily manipulated they have exemplarily manipulated our emotions, commanding the unquestionable commitment of our votes. Unlike the physical enslavement of our ancestors past, today the bondage is mental. Our compulsive voting patterns empower no one but the Democrat leaders themselves, yet we remain invested in their promise that welfarism, economic egalitarianism, and socialism will somehow render us freer. Understand that it was not always like this. While blacks certainly have always generally voted in a bloc, that bloc did not always exist beneath the Democrat Party. In the beginning, of course, blacks were committed Republicans. When black men were given the right to vote in the 1870s, they cast their ballots on behalf of the party of their great, sorry about that. In the beginning, of course, blacks were committed Republicans. When black men were given the right to vote in the 1870s, they cast their ballots on behalf of the party of their great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. Post Civil War, Reconstruction efforts began strong. Blacks were given land to work and federal protection courtesy of Union soldiers, and in short time went into business and were elected to political offices. But Southern Democrats still wallow in their defeat from the Civil War, were outraged to see that the formerly enslaved were ascending into social status and would soon avenge their grievances. Buoyed by the 1865 assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the resultant presidential appointment of his vice president, Democrat Andrew Johnson, Southern Democrats began efforts to reverse every Reconstruction gain. White vigilante bands used physical force to keep blacks from voting, allowing for segregationists to be elected to Congress. With their political power affirmed, new regulations which would come to be known as Jim Crow laws, were implemented, stripping blacks of their newly gained sense of enfranchisement. These laws redesigned blacks as second class citizens. Then came the Compromise of 1877. After a corrupted election of 1876, Democrats agreed to concede the Republican candidate Rutherford Hayes on the condition of his agreement to remove Union troops from the South. After the Civil War, Union troops were stationed throughout Southern states to, among other things, safeguard the newfound rights of Black Americans. The compromise left Black Americans once again at the full mercy of racist whites, who were determined to be restored to their pre war lifestyles. Naturally, after so many demeaning blows delivered at the hands of Democrats, blacks remained fiery, loyal to the Republican Party. So, when did this begin to change? 50 years later, when the nation was engulfed by the Great Depression, a Democrat's promise of government programs that would lift every American out caught the presidential election, pitting Franklin Delano Roosevelt against Republican Alf Landon. Kelly Miller of the Pittsburgh Courier, one of the most widely read black newspaper in the country, explained why he believed blacks should keep Roosevelt in the White House. I am for the reelection of Roosevelt because his administration has done much for the benefit of the Negro, as could have humanly been expected upon under all of the handicapping circumstances with which he had to contend. There had been no hint or squint in the direction of hostile and unfriendly racial legislation. Scarcely a harsh denunciation word had been heard in the halls of Congress against the Negroes, such as we had become accustomed to for a generation under both Democratic and Republican rule. Roosevelt has given the Negro larger recognition by way of appointative positions than any other administration, Democrat or Republican, since Theodore Roosevelt and an administration of huge appropriation for work and relief the Negro has shared according to his needs. While the New Deal was far from perfect and FDR stopped short of actively advocating for black civil rights, his efforts were deemed more substantive than his opposing Republican contender. Blacks saw a window of opportunity and they took it. with a decisive 71% of them casting their ballot in behalf of the Democrat nominee through the lens of their subhuman treatment and economic desperation. They felt that they had nothing to lose. Then 30 years later, Democrat President Lyndon B. Johnson signed both the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, all but cementing his party's stranglehold on the black vote for decades to come. It was a watershed moment in American history, a pledged breakthrough for the black community. At long last, blacks would be able to bid farewell to the days of oppression and step fully inside the American dream. Of course, no such thing happened, or else I would have no need to write this book. In reality, despite our faithful marriage to the Democrat Party, Black America has made scarcely any improvements by way of closing the achievement gap with white Americans. A 2008 study by the Economic Policy Institute was commissioned as a follow up to a similar study conducted some 50 years earlier. The results offer insight into the condition of Black America today, compared to the Black America of Lyndon B. Johnson's time. African Americans today are much better educated than they were in 1968, but still lag behind whites in overall educational attainment. These are bullets. Bullet two. African Americans are 2.5 times as likely to be in poverty as whites, and the median white family has almost 10 times as much wealth as the median black family. With respect to home ownership, unemployment, and incarceration, conditions for black Americans have either failed to improve relative to whites or have worsened. In 2007, the black unemployment rate was 7.5%, up from 6.7% in 1968, and is still roughly twice the white unemployment rate. In 2015, the black home ownership rate was just over 40%, virtually unchanged since 1968, and trailing a full 30 points behind the white home ownership rate, which saw modest gains over the same period. The share of African Americans in prison or jail almost tripled between 1968 and 2016 and is currently more than 6 times the white incarceration rate. In short, despite overwhelmingly casting our votes for Democrat political candidates, disparities between white Americans and black Americans still exist across many categories, have worsened. Certainly, no sane person would make the argument that America has become a more racist country since the 1960s, which gives way to the obvious truth that these disparities have little to do with systematic oppressions. But obvious truths have never been the way of the Democrat Party. Like FDR and LBJ before them, today's Democrat leaders established their bases by theatrically harping on the struggles of minorities. They lament the injustice of our circumstances with an all too familiar silver line promise that a vote for them will surely turn things around. Of course, the success of this repeat broken promise strategy is fueled by our acceptance of their victim narrative. And because victims cannot also be victors, the end result is a paradoxical nightmare, an endless cycle of voting for necessary change while refusing to change the way in which we vote necessarily. What the hell do you have to lose? Donald Trump's words were direct and precise. And as I watched from my television screen in his August 19, 2016 campaign, stop in Domedale, Michigan, I could not help but nod in agreement. He was emphatic as he implored blacks to consider voting for him in the upcoming presidential election. You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good, he said. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. In his blunt, matter of fact way, Trump called attention to a reality that has gone unspoken for far too long. While Democrats have long acknowledged our struggles and the crimes enacted against us, they have done little to provide actual remedies to prepare us for a future that does not center on our brokenness. Trump's speech was a call to action for anyone who dared to abandon the status quo in favor of real change. This moment, Trump's simple question forever altered me. I instantly felt a tide of urgency because deep down, I knew the answer to this question. Deep down, we all know the answer to his question. We we now know what Trump was indeed elected as the 45th president of the United States, just as we also know that the majority of black vote went to his Democrat opponent, Hillary Clinton. What has transpired since? Then then has been a social fracturing like nothing we have ever seen in this country. Hard lines have been drawn in the sand, and blacks have predictably stood to the left side of them. But as we approach the 2020 election, I am asking the black community, I am asking you, reader, to reconsider the realities of our current economic state, the condition of our schools and neighborhoods, the number of our young men who are incarcerated. The Democrat Party teaches that more law, more government, more state is the answer, but they are wrong. We cannot rely upon a hopelessly inefficient and burdensome government to fix what ourselves refuse to do. My challenge to every American is simple: reject the left's victim narrative and do it yourself. Because we will never realize the true potential that this incredible country has to offer in the land of the free and the home of the brave if we continue to be shackled by the great myth of government deliverance. Throughout the rest of this book, I will detail just why I believe the Democrat Party's policies have led to the erosion of the black community by fostering a persistent victim mentality. I will explain how a radicalized push for feminism is both emasculating and criminalizing men who are needed to lead strong families, and I will reveal the fallacy of socialism and this inherent argument for the same government that crippled Black America in the first place. Lastly, I will expose the inefficiency of the left leaning public education system and tackle the media's role in the collective brainwashing of our youth. And then I will ask again, what do you have to lose? Because I believe the answer is everything. If we do not black out from this toxic, illiberal, progressive agenda, what has precipitated what has precipitated little more than helplessness. So that was the introduction. So I didn't read the first chapter. The introduction was what do we have to lose? Yeah, the introduction was what do we have to lose, and the first chapter is on conservatism. So I just wanted y'all to get a taste of that. This book came out this year. I think it just released like 2 weeks ago, so I got it as soon as it came out. Again, this is Candace Owens, Blackout: How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat plantation. So if you plan on buying it or wanted to buy it, that was the introduction. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we can discuss later. Peace. Thanks for listening.